Back in the 1960s, the United States wanted to ban convertible vehicles completely. They thought there was not enough rollover protection for these cars. Porsche wanted to create the next 911, a 911 convertible. And the success they had with the Porsche 356, the Roadsters, the Speedsters, a convertible was inevitable. But with the United States banning them and the US being such a huge market for these 911s and these convertibles, Porsche had to find a solution. Enter the 67 Targa, soft window. In 1964, Porsche unveiled the 911. It was the replacement for the 356, and it was a big moment for Porsche. I mean, think about it, the very first 911. In 1967 is when we got the first 911S, the bigger engine, more power, better braking, better suspension, and on top of that, 67 was the very first year we got a Porsche Targa. The first thing you're going to notice on the 67 soft window Targa is there is no fixed glass in the back. That's right, when Porsche introduced the Targa, there was no fixed glass option. It was only a stainless roll bar, and then you had a zip-up soft plastic window in the back, and then your typical Targa top in the front. That's what made it a soft window Targa. But there was some issues with that layout. We're talking about plastics and materials in the 60s here. So as soon as it got a little bit cold and the plastics contracted, you could no longer stretch the top in the back far enough to be able to zip it up. As a matter of fact, Porsche issued a warning saying that under 15 degrees Celsius that you can't put the top back up and it's not recommended to be used. So they started offering a glass option. They introduced a fixed glass back end, and that's how the Targa moved forward from then on. We have between 67 and 68 for the soft window Targa before it was completely gone. 925 cars total with an S engine have ever been built as a soft window Targa, making this one of the rarest 911s ever made. This is for my 911 guys. The enthusiasts, do you see anything off about this Targa bar? What's different about this Targa bar? I'll give you a second. That's right, it's missing the 3 slats. The Targa bars always have the 3 slats on the side. The vents are for relieving cabin pressure when the top is completely closed. So this is the first year production of the Targa, and it does not have the vents in the Targa bar. Welcome to the back end of the world's first 911S, and the S got a lot of premium upgrades. So we got about 25% more power. Nice power bump over the original 130 horsepower 911. So the 911 was released with 130 horsepower, and it wasn't until 1967 when we got the 911S with 160 horsepower. Aside from the higher horsepower engine, which we'll dive into in a second, it also got ventilated disc brakes and Koni shocks for better handling and better stopping power. So let's dive into the engine of the world's first 911S. And there she is. The world's first 911S got a 2-liter engine. It had forged aluminum pistons back in 1967, revised cam profiles, larger valves, and a higher compression ratio. A combination of all these things got the engine to a total of 160 horsepower. And for the weight of this vehicle and how little and nimble it is, the 160 horsepower was a lot of power for back in the day, and it's still a blast to drive in today's standards. All of these classic first-gen 911s, they came with gold badging, and it looks absolutely immaculate, especially on this Irish green. And I'm going to tell you a lot more on this Irish green, but that's going to come up in a second. So let's talk about the badging, the squared off lettering. It just sits so beautifully, especially on this Irish green. And then we move up to the grille on the back over here. This grille is constructed using numerous pieces of metal. You see all the details on the bolts keeping it together. None of it's hidden, none of it's out of sight. It just looks so freaking cool. You don't get these in these modern cars, and that's why these vehicles are skyrocketing in price. And on that note, let me tell you guys, what we do at Studio Motors is we buy cars like this. So if you know anybody selling a vintage vehicle, a classic vehicle, especially European, let us know. info@studiomotors.com. Now, why Targa? By 1967, Porsche had won 6 championships at Targa Florio in Sicily, Italy. The Targa Florio race was extremely dangerous, and it was a mountain road, and Porsche was very successful there. So when they were introducing the new model with the roll bar that was going to come to the United States, they floated the name Flory around, Florio, and they almost nailed it down, and then eventually they named it Targa and dropped the Florio part, and that's how the Targa name came to be. I mean, think about that. The story alone is like fascinating. Because of US regulations, Porsche makes a convertible 911 and they put a roll bar on it and they call it a Targa, right? And the Targa becomes a staple, a household name, just like 911, just like Carrera, it becomes part of the Porsche world permanently. Now, what makes this example of a 911S is the fact that it's already a one of 483 cars in the world, but on top of that, it's Irish green. And let me tell you why that makes it so special. Irish green was Porsche's favorite color, and to celebrate that, the 1 millionth 911 that came off the assembly line, that's right, was Irish green. And it's a beautiful color, non-metallic, and it speaks with the aluminum and chrome and the gold badges so perfectly well. First thing you notice when you jump in this thing is the steering wheel, the thin rim wooden steering wheel. It's so big, it's as vintage of a look as it gets. Aside from that, everything else is so mint in the car, so beautiful. This is how this thing looked in 1967, and that's how it was restored to look in 2010. This is a 13-year-old restoration. After 12 years, if this is how well this restoration has held up, it's going to continue holding up just as well moving forward, because within the first couple of years, you're going to know if it's a good restoration or not. Your tach's in the middle and your speedometer's on the right. And these are VDO gauges. They're gorgeous. They're vintage. They have the green color to them. There's something so cool about these vintage cars, these classic cars. Lots of heritage, lots of history. Being a one of 483 vehicle, this thing's gonna do nothing but go up in price. So it's something you could really enjoy, and it's a good investment at the same time. Like all classic 911s, we have a dog leg transmission in this car. What that means is your first gear is not up here. Your first gear is to the left and down. So this would be first gear over here. So where's second? Second is where normally third would be. And where's third? Where fourth would be. And the reason for that is this. Back in the day when they raced these cars, they used first gear just to take off, and it was never used during the race. So instead of constantly going from second gear down here to third up here, you're going from second to third, and it makes the shifting process a lot easier. Beautiful. So nice and clicky, it's so satisfying. One more thing I want to show you guys, but before I do that, don't forget we are buying vintage and classic European vehicles, so please keep us in mind if you are selling a vintage or classic European vehicle. info@studiomotors.com. Check out these driving lights that are mounted into the horn grills. These are the horn grills, and these are straight from the Porsche factory to mount extra driving lights, and they are purely Porsche. So hope you guys enjoyed that video. Hope you learned something. Like, subscribe, share it with a friend that might be into Porsches. Dave Studio Motors, we are out.